All right. Let's dive into this Panasonic Lumix G9 Mark II.
Oh, yeah.
For those who are familiar with Micro Four Thirds cameras, you've probably heard about this one, especially if you've heard that it's like a mini EOS R5.
Yeah.
We're going to get into all that, but the real story here is that our reviewer, a self-proclaimed M43 enthusiast, can't stop raving about how this camera finally tackles the autofocus limitations
Yeah.
that have been plaguing the Panasonic M43 line for years.
Yeah. The autofocus is a big deal.
It is.
And Panasonic has finally integrated phase detection autofocus into their M43 system with the G9 Mark II.
Right.
And, a lot of people are like, why does that even matter?
Yeah, why should we care?
Well, think about it this way. It's like you can now use all those great Olympus lenses with complete confidence.
Okay, so it opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Exactly. It's not about, it's not just about like keeping up with Olympus or anything like that.
Right.
It's about giving you more choices and flexibility when you're building your camera system. That's always a good thing.
And we all love choices, right? Okay, so we've got this G9 Mark II and the GH6 both have that 25 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor.
Yeah.
The G9 Mark II seems to be more photocentric though, whereas the GH6 is more of that video powerhouse.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
The GH6 is definitely designed with videographers in mind. G9 Mark II leans more towards photography.
Yeah.
But don't let that fool you.
Okay.
It's still a really capable video camera.
Right.
The interesting thing is that the G9 Mark II actually uses the same body as the Panasonic S5 Mark II.
Right.
Without the cooling fan. So you get those dual SD card slots, similar to the OM1.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so good for reliability and just a nice, smooth workflow.
All right, so let's talk about that phase detection autofocus. Because
Okay.
our reviewer actually did some real-world tests, and they said that the G9 Mark II paired with an Olympus lens actually outperformed the GH6 using a native Panasonic lens when it came to continuous autofocus.
Sure, just
Pretty convincing, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It really suggests that Panasonic has addressed a key concern that a lot of photographers had with their M43 system.
Right.
But, more important than just benchmarks and stuff
Yeah.
is how it actually feels when you're using it.
Right.
And the reviewer seems to confirm that the difference is noticeable.
Right.
They described the G9 Mark II's autofocus as more resolute and decisive
Oh, wow.
than the GH6.
And that's not just marketing jargon, right? It actually makes a difference when you're out there in the field.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Imagine you're trying to capture something that's moving really fast.
Right.
Maybe a bird in flight or an athlete.
Right.
That improved autofocus
Yeah.
means you're more likely to actually get those sharp, in focus shots that you want.
Of course, yeah. Speaking of video, the G9 Mark II is the first camera from Panasonic that offers 4K 120 frames per second recording with continuous tracking autofocus.
It is, yeah.
So for videographers out there, what does this mean for them?
Well, if you're into slow motion,
Mm-hmm.
it's a game changer.
Right.
Imagine capturing those really cool moments in crazy detail and slowing them down.
Right.
But you don't have to sacrifice that focus accuracy.
Right.
That's the kind of creative freedom this camera unlocks.
Right. And our reviewer was super impressed with the camera's performance paired with telephoto lenses, especially the 100 to 400,
Yeah.
which gives you an equivalent reach of 800 millimeters. They were talking about using this setup handheld at an air show.
Wow.
That's serious confidence in the camera's ability.
It is. And, the cool thing about Micro Four Thirds, especially for telephoto, is that it's relatively affordable.
Okay.
Panasonic has a great range of lenses, like their 35 to 100 f2.8,
Right.
50 to 200 f2.8-4, and of course that 100 to 400,
Right.
all at price points significantly lower than comparable full-frame setups.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So for photographers on a budget who are looking to explore the world of telephoto, the G9 Mark II and the M43 system in general offers a pretty fantastic entry point.
Totally. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to address the elephant in the room,
Okay.
or maybe the smaller sensor in the room.
Okay, I like that.
Our reviewer described the M43 platform as cooling.
Okay, now this is where it gets a bit tricky, right?
Yeah.
Does cooling mean that you should be worried about investing in this system?
Well, let's explore that a little bit, what the reviewer meant by that and what that means for you.
All right, so the reviewer called the M43 platform cooling. Does that mean the system is like on its way out or something?
Well, I think it's important to remember that technology is always evolving, right?
Right.
Just because something isn't the absolute newest thing out there
Right.
doesn't mean it's no longer good or capable or whatever.
Right.
What the reviewer seems to be pointing out is that Yeah, M43 might not be at the bleeding edge of sensor technology, but it still offers a really compelling balance of performance and features and value, especially for people who are on a budget, you know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't forget, the G9 Mark II still has some pretty cool features.
Like that high resolution mode that lets you make 100 megapixel images.
Right, 100 megapixels.
Yeah, I know it's not like true 100 megapixels the same way a bigger sensor would do it.
Yep.
But it's still really cool, and it's still useful, especially for landscape photography, where you want all those details.
I want all that resolution, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like having the best of both worlds, right? A compact system with the ability to get those high-res shots when you need them.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's go back to that cooling comment for a second.
Okay.
What are the real implications here for someone who's considering buying a G9 Mark II? What do they really need to know?
I think it comes down to your priorities and needs as a photographer.
Okay.
If you're someone who's like constantly chasing the absolute latest sensor tech
Right.
and really pushing like low light performance,
Okay.
then maybe full frame is more your thing, or even medium format.
Okay.
But if you value like a balance of performance, portability, and affordability, M43 still has a lot to offer. Right. The reviewer also brought up some interesting points about how software is kind of helping to close the gap between M43 and larger sensor systems.
Yeah.
Specifically, they mentioned Adobe's lens blur feature, which can simulate that shallow depth of field look.
Right, yeah. This is a good example of how software is becoming such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
You know, it gives you more creative control over your images.
Right.
And lets you do things that might have been difficult to achieve with the M43 sensor on its own.
So even though M43 cameras have a harder time getting that blurry background bokeh,
Yeah.
there are ways to kind of fake it in post.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's not just bokeh either. Software is getting so good at noise reduction.
Right.
It's making a huge difference when shooting in low light.
Yeah.
The reviewer even said that they rely on auto ISO now.
Wow.
And they just clean up any noise afterwards.
Okay.
Which just shows how far these algorithms have come.
Yeah.
You know.
So it sounds like software is becoming kind of a game changer, not just for M43, but for photography as a whole.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get back to the G9 Mark II and how it performs in like real world shooting situations.
Okay.
The reviewer mentioned some pretty cool experiences with bird photography.
Oh, yeah.
Which of course demands both speed and precision.
Definitely. And this is where that 60 frames per second continuous shooting comes in.
Okay.
Combined with the pre-shooting function.
Right, pre-shooting.
Yeah, which is really handy because it starts taking pictures before you even fully press the shutter button.
Wow. So even if you don't have the fastest reflexes, you're still less likely to miss that perfect shot.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And you combine that with the better autofocus, especially with the telephoto lenses, and you have a killer setup for bird photography.
Right. And we talked about earlier how cost-effective the M43 system is for telephoto.
Yeah.
With all the lenses that Panasonic makes, you can build a pretty versatile kit without spending a fortune.
Exactly. And the fact that the reviewer was using the G9 Mark II and that 100 to 400 lens at an air show says a lot about how much they trusted it to handle fast action and difficult lighting conditions.
Now, let's talk about a concern that I think a lot of people have when it comes to M43.
Okay.
Bokeh.
Yeah.
The reviewer addressed this directly and even suggested a solution.
They did, yeah. They mentioned using Adobe's lens blur feature in Lightroom and Camera Raw, which can help to make that background blur a little bit better.
Ooh.
Obviously, it's not going to perfectly replicate a larger sensor, but it's a really clever way to bridge the gap and get a nicer separation between your subject and the background.
So that's a good tool to have in your back pocket.
It is, yeah.
Especially if you're shooting portraits with M43.
Especially for portraits, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's worth remembering that technology is always moving forward.
Right.
We're seeing incredible advances in computational photography now.
Right.
With things like AI playing a bigger role in image processing and editing.
It's pretty amazing what they're doing with software these days.
It is.
Yeah.
So even though M43 has its limitations, there are definitely ways to work around them and still create fantastic images.
It's about using the strengths of the system.
Exactly.
And finding ways to make it work for you.
Yeah. It's about being creative and resourceful.
I like that. So with all this in mind, who do you think the G9 Mark II is really for?
I think based on everything we've talked about, it's tailor-made for someone who wants high performance, but without the price tag of a full-frame system.
Okay.
It's kind of like that sweet spot for people who are serious about their photography, but maybe aren't ready to drop a ton of money on the top-tier gear just yet.
Right, so like someone who's maybe considering going full frame, but they're a little hesitant about the cost.
Exactly. And those lens prices can be scary.
Yeah, they can.
So the G9 Mark II gives you a lot of the same features and performance, but at a way more affordable price.
And it can do both stills and video really well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So that's another plus.
Huge plus. You don't need to carry around 2 cameras.
Right, exactly. What about people who are really drawn to the small size and lightweight of Micro Four Thirds?
Yeah, that's a big appeal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the G9 Mark II is great for that, too.
Okay.
The reviewer even specifically mentioned how portable it is and how easy it is to use with those big telephoto lenses.
Yeah, you could take that thing anywhere.
You could. It'd be perfect for, like, traveling or if you need to be discreet and move around quickly.
Right, like hiking through the woods to get that wildlife shot.
Exactly. Or street photography, you know. It's not going to weigh you down.
And the lenses are so much smaller and lighter, too, compared to full frame.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And there's so many lenses to choose from with Micro Four Thirds.
That's true. You've got Panasonic and Olympus making lenses.
Right. It's a huge selection.
You can build a pretty awesome kit.
You can.
No matter what kind of photography you're into.
Yeah, exactly. Landscapes, portraits, wildlife, you name it.
But I keep coming back to that cooling comment from the reviewer. Should people be worried about the future of the M43 system?
It's a fair question.
Oh.
But I don't think cooling necessarily means dead.
Right.
It just means that maybe M43 isn't going to be the leader in sensor technology anymore.
Okay.
But it's still a really solid system with a lot to offer.
Especially with all the advances we've seen in software and image processing.
Exactly. That's helping to address some of the traditional weaknesses of M43, like the bokeh and the low light performance.
Right, right. So it really comes down to choosing the right tool for the job.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, the G9 Mark II might be just that.
I think so.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what was like the biggest takeaway for you from all this?
I think for me, it's that we shouldn't get too hung up on having the absolute latest gear.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best camera is the one that inspires you to go out and shoot.
Yeah.
And the one that fits your budget and your way of working.
The one that brings you joy. I love that. Well said. All right, folks. So there you have it. The Panasonic Lumix G9 Mark II. Powerful, versatile, and surprisingly affordable.
And small.
And small. You're right. A camera that really pushes the limits of what's possible in the Micro Four Thirds world.
Yeah, it's an exciting camera.
It is. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep those cameras clicking.
See you on the next deep dive.